Views expressed by Casters Guild members are only the opinions of that member, and that could change from day to day. Guild members may use mature language, but that in no way means they are mature. Listener discretion is advised.
In 1974, Gary Gygax and some friends started a new game by asking themselves what it would be like to play as one soldier, a hero, instead of an entire army. After years of religious persecution and political assassination, D&D was on the decline. But now it's back and stronger than ever. What caused this resurgence? Well, that's the spell we're casting tonight on Casters Guild. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's episode of Casters Guild. I am your Guild Master, Rick Perry, and your multi-class Sorcerer Artificer.
Oh, we could do that. And I'm your Guild Master, Baron Kane, and I guess I'm just your Sorcerer Fighter guy.
And joining us for the first time on the cast is one of our original Guild members. Feel free to introduce yourself.
There are some who call me Kim.
I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually Kimmy, but you know.
I have a list though, so.
Yeah, I intend to be inclusive, so.
All right, and
for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming. And tonight we are once again talking D&D, but tonight we're not teaching you how to play it. We're talking a little bit about how it is as popular as it is right now.
Because quite frankly, if we have to teach you how to play it or run it again, we're not doing our jobs right.
So we have a disclaimer at the beginning of this cast. And what I'm about to say is true of every episode, but I think it needs to be stated, especially for this episode, okay? I don't know about the other two on the cast tonight, but I do no research for any episode. And I'm about to do a whole lot of talking.
Do you really never do research for episodes?
Pretty much never. No.
Oh, okay. You know what? I was kind of impressed before anyways. Now I'm super impressed because I always thought you did research.
No, I almost sometimes I'll Google one or two things, but I don't really do research. This time I definitely didn't do any research. I'm going to do a whole lot of talking as if everything I say is fact. I just want to let you know this is opinion and my opinion and no one else's opinion, but I'm still going to present it as if it is fact.
I would like to also point out that if you're not listening to the beginning of our podcast, where I say this before every podcast fresh. It may sound like it's identically the same, but I say it fresh at the beginning of every podcast. These views and opinions are our own. So don't take anything we say for fact unless we have Grass Tyson on.
And I think a good place to start tonight's episode, so we know where these views and opinions are coming from, is
TikTok.
Where you started with D&D. About when you started, where the state of the game was when you started, what edition you started with, all that kind of stuff. Just give us a little bit of a story about where you were when you started with D&D. And we usually start with our guests. So, Kimmy, feel free to fire that one off.
Well, my very first D&D experience, I don't necessarily consider this the first, my first proper D&D game, but it was my first attempt. It was my cousin and I was staying the night at his house, and I was, I think maybe 11 or 12. This was, in the early 90s. And honestly, I'm not even sure what edition it was. I'm guesstimating that it was either second or maybe third. He had some of his friends' D&D stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, well, we'll play this, for a little bit. It's really cool and stuff. And he had two characters that his friend had already drawn up. And was like, okay, yeah, this is your character. I'll walk you through when the stuff comes up and explain it and everything. I was a huge fantasy nerd and stuff anyway, so he pretty much sold it to me on that. So we had our two characters. We had gotten hired by some guy to clear the monsters out of the tower he inherited or something. Got our two characters. We walked through the tower, and we were at like I think the front gate, and something like if I remember correctly, it was something like it was either a skeleton or a skeleton with like a flaming head or something. But my character basically got punched in the face, and then as soon as he realized that, oh wait, if I'm keeping track of like your hit points and everything, I have to make changes to my friend's character sheet. So he was like, okay, we'll have to work around this. And then I just said, this sucks. Can we play Sega? And then that was my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, so since you threw the qualifier on it, I gotta ask, what do you consider your first proper experience with Dungeons and Dragons?
Okay, first proper, and before I even got to, I will throw another little qualifier in here, is in the interim from that time until actually I got to play the game proper, I did kind of get into just like reading the lore, like parents turn you loose into a bookshop and, loving the artwork and stuff. So it's like, oh, okay, I want to, you start thumbing through the monster manuals and reading about all the crazy stuff and all that. And then also on my original Xbox, having Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2, which that was
classic.
Yeah, that was what actually hooked me on Dungeons and Dragons initially, was playing both of those games, especially the second one. I actually still have the second one for my OG Xbox. But first proper game that I got into was one that Baron had ran. And Brad, how long ago was the sausage game?
4 years now, I think.
No, it was longer than that, because it's been longer than that, because in like a couple of months I'll have been living in Ohio for 4 years. So
okay.
I know it's been a while. I almost want to say maybe 6 years ago. But yeah, we our friend Ray and I had come to Ohio. This was when both of us were living in Michigan. And we came down here, and Brad was like, "I'll run a D&D game for it. What kind of?" It was pretty much you were just like, "What kind of character?" I'll make up the character sheet and stuff. You guys don't worry about it. Just what kind of character do you want to play as, and we'll go from there. And that's pretty much what happened. We got together like around noonish, and we got a good 4-hour session in with our characters and stuff, and it was the first, proper D&D game I'd ever participated in. The learning experience for sure, but even having the Brad's, playing the mayor of the town and acting like real shady and like, okay, hang on, we don't really trust this guy. And Brad's like, all right, make a perception roll. Full table just fucks up right down the line. Like, we trust this guy perfectly. Oh shit. That's how this game works? Okay. Like, this guy's gonna screw us over. All our characters, no, he's on the up and up. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then after that, it always was just like, yeah, we'll figure out trying to get another game going, or just finding.
That's your real introduction to D&D.
Yeah.
Is we played a game and I love it. All right, let's figure out when we're gonna play again. Never play again.
Yeah. Exactly.
Too true.
Finding more people and stuff that were into it, and kind of just finding that shared community, and even podcasts and stuff. That was a big part that got me really hooked into it, was finding the different real play podcasts and stuff that were doing D&D. So
yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that during this, because that's a big part of the reason D&D is successful today. And just a small tangent, since you were talking about Baldur's Gate, have you guys seen the trailer for the new D&D game that's coming out? What's it called? Darkest Dungeon? Dark Alliance?
Dark Alliance. Yeah, it's because they never got around to making Dark Alliance 3, even though the second one ended on that huge ass cliffhanger.
I am so pumped for Dark Alliance and co-op, and but yeah, it's a tangent, but God, I want that game so bad. So Baron, same question.
I will answer this question in a way that will highlight what we're talking about tonight. My first exposure to D&D were my parents telling me that I'll never play it because it was devil. basically, they believe that only Satanists or devil worshippers played D&D, and that it perverted the mind, and because we were all right around that whole satanic panic shit, and those stories of those kids dying in the sewer tunnels, which was completely false. They heard about all that stuff, so of course I wasn't allowed to play. And then my first, not necessarily proper exposure to D&D would be reading books. Spellfire by Ed Greenwood, The Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, the Crystal Shard, that's it, the Crystal Shard, which was the Spine of the World trilogy, with Bruner and Wolfgar and stuff. That I like the book, but fuck's sake, that group confused the hell out of me. But you have the barbarians. D&D barbarians back then were confusing as shit. Confusing. You had Wolfgar, who was quite obviously some Viking dude, but their barbarian clans were broken up into clearly clans and tribes that were inspired by native and First Nations people, and it's what's happening? What am I reading right now? And then the Drow, back when we all thought Drow were evil, and then we're gonna put Dritz in this. It's I don't understand. Anyways, so then my first real introduction to D&D was on the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. And we were standing in the hotel room, and all of us in there were playing for the first time, except for one dude who was running it, and we played in Dragonlance. I played a Mountain Dwarf Rogue, and should have been Hill Dwarf Rogue, but I remember very specifically one part of the game where I got up in a tree to shoot something with my hand crossbow, which was, I don't even know what I was doing. I think I just wanted to do rogue shit, so I did rogue shit. Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't a rogue, it was a thief. I was a mountain thief, because I was playing AD&D back then. So yeah, that was my first real introduction to D&D right there.
All right. So let's see. When I was in middle school, I had some friends who were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I rolled a character, and that was as far as I got. And I talked to my mom, and I was like, "Hey, my friends in middle school are all playing D&D. I'm gonna play D&D with my friends." And she was like, "The hell you are! D&D is played by a bunch of nerds and geeks, and I'll be damned if you're gonna be antisocial and not like." She didn't want me to grow up to be a nerd who had no friends. That was her whole thing.
Which was worse?
Yeah, it was 100% worse. I ended up being I ended up making less friends because of it, because I basically didn't get to be myself. Okay, my mother has a very good heart. I love her very much. That particular decision was a little misguided, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that she didn't understand D&D, and I think it also had to do with my dad. My dad was an incredible nerd and played Dungeons and Dragons when he was young. And I think she kind of had this idea in her head, and I think a lot of people did around that time, that you have the gamer, and it's the guy who has the neck beard, won't leave his mom's basement. It's just that stereotype, and that was not the person my mother wanted me to become. So later on, after I had joined the Navy, I was walking through the mess hall one day, and there were a bunch of guys who were rolling dice. And I sat down, and I was like, "Hey, what's all this about?" And at the time, they were playing Vampire the Masquerade, I think, which then later led into Exalted, and then a very short Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which only lasted 2 sessions, where I rolled up because it was I ended up needing 3 different books to play this character, but I was playing a half-elf vampire samurai. Way too convoluted for my first character. Should have went way simpler. And then after we got back to shore, that same guy who was running that campaign was like, "Hey, my friend's running a D&D campaign. You should come play in our D&D campaign." And this guy who was running this D&D campaign was the guy I had played World of Warcraft with a couple of times. His name was Baron Kane. And So I went and started playing in this 4th edition D&D campaign, and I remember like this very clear feeling when I was playing that D&D campaign, a feeling I had never had before when playing another game. Like every hour that would pass, I would look at my phone or look at my watch and realize an entire hour would pass, and I would go, man, I hope we're not done. And like several hours later, it finally wrapped up, and I was like, man, that was so awesome. And I couldn't wait for the next week when we would do it again.
Now,
And
I do want to say this is going to be the only really time I'm going to flex on myself. That says a lot about me as a game master, because 4th edition fucking sucks. I'm just saying that right now.
I will defend 4th edition to my last breath. Like
I take responsibility for that.
Well, to be fair, like after that campaign, which to be honest didn't last very long, and I think it was because nobody other than me at the table was enjoying 4th edition.
I had to do a lot of stuff to make that game palatable for a lot of people, and it was draining. It wasn't sustainable for me.
But that was 2006, 2007 that we started that.
Yeah.
And then in order to play the game, because nobody wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, because everybody was like, oh, I'm really 4th edition, whatever. In order to play the game, like I had to become the dungeon master. And so all the way up until 5th edition came out, I ran 4th edition regularly. And so like just in my own experience in running 4th edition, like I'll defend 4th edition to the ends of the earth. I understand its flaws, and I understand why 5th edition is superior, but I will also say there's a lot of things that you can learn from 4th edition to make some of the other editions better, and vice versa. Basically, so that I come from a position where I started Dungeons and Dragons during like it's one of its lowest points. Like people talk about, 4th edition being like the low point. Like I started during the Valley, and I remember seeing that climb upwards from the bottom of that valley. So like I'm not. So the only reason I did this is because I can see both of you have at least a little bit of experience before the Valley, but I started at the bottom, and now we're here. To pardon the expression. But
like in Kimmy's case, when she started to actually play, she was on the way up.
Yeah, so basically that's the whole reason we did this question. We got 3 unique viewpoints here on the revival of D&D. And basically, I mean, like I haven't checked since I would say 2019, but since D&D 5th edition was released, and I remember playing the D&D Next beta.
Mm-hmm.
But since D&D 5th edition has been released, every year subsequent has been the highest performing year for Dungeons and Dragons. Like every year, it's the best year for Dungeons and Dragons.
I will say I liked D&D Next better than I like what we got.
Okay. All right.
There was just certain, I mean, I'm barely, but I liked D&D Next better. There was just some things about it that just it felt better to me.
So I think that one of the reasons that 4th edition did so poorly is 4th edition tried to do something that 5th edition did way better, and tried to make it easy to play and learn how to play. But the way 4th edition did it is they tried to make it like a video game, because everybody knew video games. So they were like, we're going to make it like a video game.
Did you ever get to play 4th edition, Kimmy?
No.
Okay, so 4th edition, like, you know how you get to do all those cool moves and stuff like that, and like, clap piranha between your butt cheeks and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't really do that in 4th edition. Everything you did was a power.
Yeah, I mean, I never played it myself, but actually
no, you have played it.
Have you ever played
Yeah, I was about to mention that. I've got 2 examples, because the first one of the Real Play podcasts, like actually the first one that I ever got into, that's what they started with, was 4th edition. And so it was like from them playing that, I kind of got at least a little bit of familiarity with it. But then those board games that I played, yeah, I remember like how you said that, that's straight up just what fourth edition was, the way that those board games broke everything down. And like, yeah, I mean, the little bit that I do know of fourth edition, I mean, yeah, it's pretty much spot on because I've played played at least two of them now. And yeah, with the way that the characters, I mean, it's basically you're playing fourth edition with like pre-gen characters.
When Neverwinter Online was free, it still is free, but did you ever play Neverwinter Online?
No.
Okay. I was going to say Neverwinter Online is one of the free-to-play Dungeons & Dragon MMORPGs, and that entire system is basically 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons.
Okay.
Like, the way they do their characters and your powers and what you can do and what you can't do is all basically 4th edition.
Yeah. Was that the one that I watched you play a bit when I got mad that you couldn't make a female dwarf with a beard?
Probably.
Okay. I think I remember, you showing me one. The Neverwinter Nights, that sounds really familiar. I think that is the one that you showed me. And
yeah, because I think I was talking into playing it.
Yeah. Because it was either just before or right around the time I moved. So that's also, I remember that. So, but yeah, Star Trek Online is starting to get kind of old for me, so I might have to get in on some Neverwinter. I might need another.
Feel free.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's free. Hey, that's what Star Trek was because it was free. So
you can play it on PC or PS4 or PS3. I think still. I know it was PS3 for a while, but yeah, and it's cross-platform too.
Ooh.
So anyway, that was the problem with 4th edition was. And I think that you had your hardcore D&D fans, right, who've been around for a long time, or started with 3rd, and like they were really into 3rd, and then 4th edition roll around, and I think 4th edition alienated a lot of the hardcore fans, and also failed to capture new fans for the most part. I mean, obviously they got me, but I don't think it's just a flex. I think that had a lot to do with Baron making it a really good game to play, and me seeing how it could be run where you don't run it, rules as written, and like you can kind of change it a bit. And so that's what I did when I dungeon mastered 4th edition, is I changed it to be a little bit more story oriented and let people do things that weren't necessarily written on their character sheets.
That was the other thing too. It's really hard to do I mean, for me, it was really hard to do story oriented stuff with 4th edition. It seemed pretty, out of the box. It's like you gotta, or pretty much in the box, where you go in and you have to have a battle map. You have to.
Yeah, it's a miniatures. It is a miniatures game. It's a lot of the powers, the way they're written, don't work without a battle map.
I was always saying that. I was like, I don't know why they just didn't call this like Chainmail 2nd edition. Just name it that, and then give us a different D&D.
Yeah. Well, they didn't. Paizo did. A lot of people made the jump to Pathfinder, but like it's kind of
Pathfinder existed before 4th edition, but it really got popular once 4th edition came out.
Right.
Because I really think that 4th edition was their answer to Pathfinder, and they thought, oh, we're going to do this 4th edition, everybody's going to leave Pathfinder. And it's like, no.
Mm-mm. They lost everybody if nothing else. So, okay, there's decline, right? Well, that had a lot to do with it, and of course there was the Satanic Panic, and the anybody who was religious was talking about how D&D was the devil, and then you had all the politics behind it, and you had both church and state all attacking Dungeons and Dragons, all through mid 80s to mid 90s, I'd say, possibly even early 80s to mid 90s.
I'd say early 80s to mid 90s.
Yeah. And it became the kind of thing where I think that there was just a stigma surrounding it. Like, if you heard that somebody was playing Dungeons and Dragons, you had this thought in your head of what Dungeons and Dragons was, and most people didn't want to be a part of it.
One person got that whole thing started. I'm trying to find their name. Patricia Pulling, apparently her son unfortunately lost his life by a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but she blamed it on him playing D&D. And she tried to sue the high school principal. Oh, okay. So I'm reading from an article from BBC News. Quote, at first, Patricia Pulling attempted to sue her son's high school principal, claiming the curse placed upon her son's character during a game run by the principal was real.
As you do.
She also sued TSR, the publishers of D&D, and despite the court dismissing the cases, Pulling continued her campaign by forming Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, or BADD, BADD, in 1983.
Wow.
Mother.
Yep, so apparently this 1980s Karen went full fucking throttle on trying to run the smear campaign against D&D.
And it was successful. I mean, let's just be real. It was very successful. A lot of TV pastors and televangelists picked up on it, and then like a bunch of people who were running for office picked up on it.
It was very trendy to bash on D&D, and it got you press back then. It got you attention.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
because it was a story they could sell.
Yep.
Especially because through the early 80s, and I'd say even to the late 80s, it was a very popular game. Like, so I wouldn't say everybody was playing it, but like it was a sizable enough people who were playing it that like everybody at least heard the name.
It was
maybe
a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's popular.
And throughout that smear campaign, like even if you didn't believe, let's say, what she was saying, where, D&D was the devil and D&D was evil and blah, 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 you saw with these news stories the people who were defending Dungeons and Dragons, and it got a different stigma. Like I said, you end up with the neckbeard, mother's basement living gamer.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got two negative stigmas on it at once.
So yeah, so you would have these kids who weren't allowed to play, one. Then you had another group of kids that probably would have enjoyed themselves, but didn't want to be associated with it because of the quote-unquote super nerds, the unsavories that were actually playing it, so they didn't want to be lumped into that group.
And then because of that, the people who were playing it, the people who were dedicated enough to continue play it and keep up with it, there became a very gatekeeping attitude to Dungeons and Dragons. Like people who played Dungeons and Dragons were like, we've been in this for forever. You have to do it our way. Or
I will say that the gatekeeping is definitely wrong, but I can understand where it's coming from.
Oh yeah. I mean, almost anybody I think listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a nerd or you're probably a geek. And like if you're not a new nerd or geek, because I will say new nerds and geeks like this, like I love the new nerd and geek culture. Almost all keeping related. But like if you're an old geek or nerd, you understand where the gatekeeping comes from. Like you were ridiculed and like bashed on for being a geek or a nerd or whatever, and you kind of understand.
It's almost like a lot of them put in their time, they took their hits, and now they probably feel like they're being swept under the rug by the new generation of nerds. And it's like, hey, we put up with all this shit so that you could come in and have fun, but it's like, that's cool. Yes, you did do that, and good for you. Now, fucking invite these kids in, let them play, teach them how to play, and shut the fuck up and enjoy all the new merch that we're getting, because fuck yes, I have a gelatinous cube Funko Pop.
Yeah. And I will say that attitude and that general, this is what D&D is, and this is what D&D needs to be, and it's what it was when we grew up playing it, so like it can't be anything else. That whole attitude was so pervasive that after that campaign I played with Baron, and then I went and started to become my own dungeon master, and I started to find players, and I got out of the Navy, and I moved back to my hometown after leaving where the base was. In order to find players, I almost became that guy. I kind of was becoming that guy. honestly, because in order to get those players to come and play in my campaign, I had to have that attitude. I had to have that, oh yeah, D&D should be this and blah, 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 blah. And like anybody who's playing this new way is dumb and a piece of shit. And in order to get players, I had to put on that persona. And at first I hated it, and then I became it, and now I hate it again. And like, it's just, it wasn't me. It wasn't who I was, but I did become that guy for a while in order to get players. But then I found some new players who had never played D&D before. And like, I had a blast with them where we had like more than a year-long campaign playing 4th edition. And like, it kind of opened my eyes again. But my only point being is it was so pervasive, that whole attitude among D&D players, that it kind of overtook who I was as a D&D player. Because in order to play, I had to be that guy.
Right. Whereas, like, I don't know, I can't really relate to, like, I can't say anything from a new player perspective. I would say,
Sure.
You're probably, do you consider yourself a new player still?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I think probably until I actually DM a game, I'm probably going to consider myself a new player.
That's fair.
I mean,
I would say the one thing I've noticed about you is that you're pretty versatile. Like, you are flexible when it comes to what you're willing to play. Would you agree with that?
Tell me more, Daddy.
Okay.
You walked right into that. You're welcome.
You think I don't do that on purpose? Come on.
Great.
No, I mean, because you jump in and you've played 5th edition. That was, you said that was the first one you've played, but then you did the board game, which is 4th edition, with a brand new group of people who are essentially new too. Yeah. I mean, Robert, and I guarantee you that me and Robert have completely different running styles, but you seem to have fun in both. You don't really complain. You have a good time. That seems that's not something that Rick and I are used to.
Well, I mean,
we're used to people getting up and walking out of game because they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, that's okay. That's I think like beyond worst case scenario, like because okay, for me personally, like yeah, I've basically had like 3 DMs, and 2 of them are on this podcast. So, but there's a 3rd one that we basically like. He wasn't a very good DM, and we had a lot of problems. I mean, it was kind of down to the point where it didn't feel like they were listening to like basically the 3 players were all saying like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense story-wise. We're not having fun, and the game really ended up kind of just petering out. And it was, I mean, I don't want to go off onto it too much.
You don't have to go too far.
Okay. I don't want to go off on too much of a rant, but I mean, it like literally boils down. It's like, on one hand, yes, they say your feelings are valid, but on the other, it's like, did I seriously get traumatized playing a game for fucking children? Well, yeah, I kind of did, because it was a very stressful and frustrating like situation trying to play this game, and it was like. There were people that were in the game that like I wanted to quit, but it's like at the same time I wanted to keep playing because with some of the people that were in the game. So it's like suck it up and try to make the best of it.
Now I will say this. That says a lot again with you, because that you were willing to stick it out. However, as the person who introduced you to D&D, I would like to bestow a little bit of advice. If that ever happens again, do not be afraid to approach your dungeon master and say, hey, these are my concerns. If they pull you off, if they don't listen to your advice, if they don't take your concerns into account and keep doing their thing, walk away from that game.
I mean, to be honest, that is pretty much what happened. It literally devolved to all the players. We were just out of character stuff, like voicing our concerns and everything, and then it was just like, okay, we're just not playing anymore. It just, yeah,
Yep,
it
that's
just
what has to happen.
yeah. So it's like, I mean, it sucked, but yeah,
Most people who play D&D, especially old school players of D&D, have that situation where they've been caught in a game they didn't like because bad D&D is better than no D&D, and like it's literally the only game they have a chance to play. Luckily, due to this resurgence, this revival of D&D, you have a lot of people have more options now. I wouldn't say. I mean, it's still, yeah. I mean, like there are a whole lot more options now, so you can leave a game if you've got a bad DM or you really don't like it. And it doesn't always necessarily mean, and I say a bad DM or you don't like it, because it doesn't necessarily mean you have a bad DM, that the DM is running a game in a way that you don't like it. That's just not the game for you.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
but like it could also be a bad DM.
Yeah, and seriously, okay, like I said, I've had 3 DMs, 2 of them I'm talking to right now. And all 3 of the DMs, literally all 3 of them have had a completely different style. Like both of you have a very different approach to like the games that we played. I mean, it was just the when you ran the one shot that we did and stuff at one time, and then all of the our different like little campaigns and stuff that Barons run and everything. And then, yeah, it's been a completely like it's been. I mean, we play by the same rules and stuff, but it's a completely different game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it should be. It should be.
So let's talk a little bit about what we think brought D&D back into the public eye. What brought it into resurgence?
Now, we'll also verify that there have been different waves of resurgency.
Yes, but like I'm talking specifically like, okay, like I said, ever since 5th edition came out, every year has been the best year for Dungeons and Dragons. Like you could say there's different reasons for the same wave, but since the beginning of 5th edition, this has all been one upward trend. Right, like there hasn't been quote unquote waves where it's gone down and come back up again. Like no, this has been all up, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely
number one, I'd like to point out that a lot of the people who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, like be it 2nd edition, 3rd edition, whatever, are now the people who are creating our media. They're the people who are creating Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, Community. That one Dungeons and Dragons episode of the Dan Harmon show, Community, I think did a lot for the game. Game of Thrones, I think, did a lot for the game because it isn't necessarily Dungeons and Dragons related, but if you look at the popularity of that show, a lot of people looked at that show and went, "This is fantasy," and it took fantasy from something this is for nerds and geeks to fantasy is for everyone. And then I think this is a many-prong attack, but I think that one was a big one. And then we have all of our live play podcasts and Twitch streams that I think demystified Dungeons and Dragons a little bit.
I really think, and this could just be because I'm a fan of the show, but I really, really think that Critical Role has played the biggest part in this recent resurgence in D&D. When they were playing their home campaign, they were playing Pathfinder. And when they got hooked up with Geek and Sundry, they talked them into switching over to 5th edition. So 5th edition was still kind of fresh.
Yep.
So they come out, and I mean, if you go back and watch their shows, you can see how many people are like subscribed to them, and it's kind of like you look at what they're at now, and you see what they were then. It's like those are rookie numbers right there. What's going on there?
I'll say, yeah, Critical Role is a huge part of it, but I say it's a multi-pronged attack because let's say I'm going to talk about a lot of things. If Critical Role had been the only thing, I don't think it would have took off. I think there are a lot of things. Critical Role came at the right time with the right set of circumstances.
Right, but
and had it been just Critical Role, I don't think we would have had the resurgence of D&D, but Critical Role plays a huge fucking part.
Huge part in that. Would all of those other people would they have been live broadcasting their show like that if Critical Role hadn't found success doing it first?
Right, but I'm not even just talking about the live broadcasting of D&D. Like, I don't think live broadcasting of D&D is the sole reason there was a resurgence in D&D. I think it's a huge
I'm more than willing to throw the marketing. The marketing that they threw at 5th edition. That was amazing.
But let's talk a little bit about live play and the part it played. So, like I said, I think the live play has kind of taken
the premiere date. The premiere date of Critical Role. Ready?
Yeah.
March 12th, 2015. March 12th is my birthday, by the way, in case anybody doesn't know.
Nice.
All right. So I think one of the biggest reasons live play played a huge part in the resurgence of Dungeons & Dragons is because it took... If you talk about, hey, do you want to play Dungeons & Dragons, people had this idea of what Dungeons & Dragons was and how it was difficult to play and it was a game they didn't want to learn. And people could watch these live plays and see what Dungeons & Dragons actually was and the ways that you could play it and how easy it could be to learn, and it got people to jump on board. But here's how I see Critical Role coming about. And once again, this is just my opinion. But a long time ago, a couple of guys who wrote a webcomic called Penny Arcade realized that their friend had never played Dungeons & Dragons before. So they were like, we're going to play Dungeons & Dragons with our friend who's never played Dungeons & Dragons before. And wouldn't that be an interesting thing for people to hear and experience? Wouldn't that be an interesting thing for us to catalog? Someone who has never played Dungeons & Dragons before, getting together with people who have played Dungeons & Dragons their entire lives and just seeing how that turns out. And they got Chris fucking Perkins to be a part of it. And they created Acquisitions Incorporated. They were playing 4th edition. Now, because Chris Perkins was involved and because of what a big part he played in creating 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, as soon as 5th edition was available, even when they were playtesting it, Acquisitions Incorporated switched over to 5th edition. And they were seeing tremendous success. They were selling out theaters for people to watch them play live D&D. So when Critical Role hooked up with Geek and Sundry, I think that has a big part to do with why Geek and Sundry was like, hey, you should play 5th edition.
Could be. Well, I mean, I also think that I think that the 5th edition decision came with the whole, because it's something that I would have done too. It would have had nothing to do with anybody but the fact that it's the current edition, easier to market, easier for sponsorship, and they've been doing the D&D Beyond since the day it came out. So
yeah,
I think that was the whole decision. It was purely from a marketing standpoint because it's easier for them to get sponsored by D&D if they are supporting the current edition.
But that being said, I think you could blame the fact that D&D and Wizards was ready to sponsor a live play stream. They were ready was the success of Penny Arcade and Acquisitions Incorporated. I think that the reason they were so ready to throw out those sponsorships and be like, "Hey, play our game," is because of the success of Acquisitions Incorporated.
Now, I will say I don't think the D&D ever sponsored.
Well, D&D Beyond.
But D&D Beyond did,
yeah.
Just it's a different company. It's a different company.
Yeah. But I think that's why. I could be wrong once again, but I think that has a lot to do with it. I think they were looking to sell their product. They saw how successful that one thing was, and then they went over to the other. But then you have Critical Role, and you combine that with the fact that they made the 5th edition basic rules free. Which was a great big welcome mat that Wizards of the Coast put out to anybody who wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons. Just like, it's free. You know what I mean? If you want to learn how to play this game, there is literally zero barrier to entry. Combine that with the fact that it's the easiest edition to learn. and they made it that way on purpose. Once again, I think they tried to do that with fourth and just kind of failed because they went about it a different way. I think D&D 5th edition was the first one where they weren't trying to compete with or trying to make it like a video game. And instead, they were like, this is a social experience. I don't want to capitalize the conversation if you guys say.
You seem to be going on a rant. I was letting you go. See where you're going with it.
Okay, so then you had the success of Critical Role, the fact that D&D 5th edition is easy to play, the fact that it's free to play, there's no barrier to entry, and now people might think that's unrelated, but in video games we have the death of in-home multiplayer. Like, the only way you can play games multiplayer, for the most part, video games multiplayer, is online. Video games became less and less of a social experience. And you have all these gamers. I think a lot of them didn't realize how much they needed a social experience until a new one was placed in front of them.
Could be.
And then you have the things that Dungeons & Dragons has always been, and now that Dungeons & Dragons kind of gets demystified, people can see what Dungeons & Dragons really is instead of the stigma that the Satanic Panic and the quote-unquote basement gamers put on it, and you realize it's this social storytelling experience. And that's something that we as human beings, and this one I'm going to say isn't even an opinion, it's fact, we as human beings need. Like, we have evolved to need social experiences and storytelling. Like, our brains actually need that in order to function.
I mean, I see that, but it's always been that, though.
Exactly.
I don't think
that's
that
what I was saying. Those are the things that D&D has always been. It's just there was this stigma on it that didn't let people see that.
Right. So I think I guess the issue is something that we've all talked about and something that you've just brought up, is perhaps something took away that stigma. So what do we think that was?
Well, what I was just saying, it was the live plays. The fact that anybody could see what D&D was just without having to go and experience it themselves, without having to find somebody to teach them how to play, without having to go play it themselves. They could just watch someone play D&D, and they probably had other friends going, hey, you should watch this, it's pretty entertaining. And they got to see what Dungeons & Dragons was.
Okay, but was that
it's it? Like, okay, if you well, like that and everything else I've been talking about, they made the rules free. They made they made the fact that fantasy was becoming part of the mainstream again with movies like Lord of the Rings and shows like Game of Thrones. These things were slowly peeling back the stigma of Dungeons & Dragons.
So I know everybody. There's a lot of people that hate it. It's definitely a problematic show in a lot of instances. But I would also like to point out that the Big Bang Theory actually went a long way of making things like this more mainstream.
That's true.
And I think that's also what it's coming down to. It's coming down to, again, like you were saying, and I guess even if this sounds like I'm repeating stuff, I'm just trying to keep the conversation going instead of tying everything into a nice little bow right now.
Sure.
I think it boils down to it's becoming mainstream, and that's why it's resurging. So, like, in what ways have we seen D&D popping up in the mainstream?
I would argue that Big Bang Theory almost was taking it in the opposite direction. When I watch Big Bang Theory is not peeling back any stigmas of nerds. Like, I feel like a lot of Big Bang Theory feeds into the stigmas of geeks and nerds, and like the fact that they're antisocial, and that like only those nerds and geeks are the ones who are playing stuff like this and doing stuff like this. And like I see what you're saying, and I see the point that you're making, but that's just as a counterpoint. I feel like because it is the show that it is and it's problematic and things like that, I feel like it may have been pulling a little bit in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of other examples of D&D and nerds and geeks in popular media, because those same nerds and geeks were playing Dungeons and Dragons are now the ones who are making our shows that aren't having that stigma. So let me rewind a little bit and talk about Dan Harmon and Community. You guys watch Community at all?
No.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. I'll make this a quick little footnote then. So Community was a really popular show. There was an episode, and they actually revisited it in a later season, where there was a geek who played Dungeons and Dragons, and he was on the verge of committing suicide because he was getting picked on for being a geek and stuff like that. And the main group, the main characters of the show, got together and played a game of Dungeons and Dragons with him, and kind of learned during that episode that it wasn't just a game for geeks and you could have a whole lot of fun with it. And they made friends with this guy just to kind of show him that, you know, he's a good person and like he can have friends and he can still love this game and still not be this outcast. And I feel like that did a lot for Dungeons and Dragons. Not to mention, after the success of that episode, Dan Harmon, being a very popular person, started his own live play, which was part animated, part not, and he had a lot of, I wish I could remember the name of it.
Harmon Quest.
Harmon Quest, thank you very much, which I think did a lot for...
Is Dan Harmon the Rick and Morty guy?
Yes.
He's one of the two. Mm-hmm. So being as popular as he was, and partly with the nerd crowd and partly not with the nerd crowd, I mean, like, Rick and Morty is pretty far-reaching, and I feel like so is Community. You know, I feel like...
It also had a D&D crossover.
Yes, that was later on, after the success of Harmontown and everything like that. Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons, which the comic book was written by Patrick Rothfuss, who has written a lot of fantasy novels and was a regular on Acquisitions Incorporated. It all ties together, man. But people see these things, and that's just one example, and we'll get into more. But people see these things, and if you handed somebody who'd never played American football before the rule book to football, they would never want to play football. If you were just like, here's this rule book, here's how you play this game, which the approach to Dungeons and Dragons had been that for so long. Like, hey, do you want to play this game? Here's this rule book, let's play this game. But people, football is so ingrained into the social conscious, and people play football because we see it all the time, and like you don't have to read the rule book to football to have an idea of how the game works. And that's what's happening with D&D.
I think, using your football analogy, that the main appeal for people playing football is the reaction that they get from the crowd. And I think that it's kind of the same way. Like, they see how popular football is, so they want to play. Right. And there's a lot of people that are seeing how popular D&D is getting, so they want to play. Which is making it more popular. So
absolutely,
there's definitely a cascade effect.
I mean, D&D at this point is so ingrained. It's like everybody's heard of D&D at this point. Like you very rarely will meet somebody and say, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and they go, oh, I've never heard of that. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, it's getting to the point where more and more people are trying it, because at this point saying I've heard of D&D but I've never played it is getting to the point where it's like, I've heard of Netflix but I've never watched it.
Right.
So after Community and their D&D episodes and Harmon Quest, what else we got? What else we have as far as D&D media?
Well, I mean, honestly, with the rise of podcasting in like the early 2010s and stuff, you had a whole bunch of like real play podcasts popping up and stuff. The problem is that a lot of them, I mean, this is 4 or 5 years before Critical Role and stuff. You had a bunch of them kind of springing up just because it was, it was this opportunity. The problem is that a lot of them weren't great for assorted reasons, also because they would be, I guess you could say, canceled now. There was a lot of them that were very not inclusive and had a lot of problematic stuff, problematic content and everything, and even like then you'd also get some of the good ones. Like actually, the first D&D podcast I ever listened to was they were originally called Drunks and Dragons, and eventually they changed it to Greetings Adventurers. They've been going since I want to say 2012. They actually had their like 400th episode not too long ago.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, seriously, yeah, and it's like, I mean, so it's a hell of an achievement, and they're actually the one that I mentioned earlier about they actually started with fourth edition, and none of them knew how to play. Like you're literally like the first several episodes, you're actually like listening to these guys like learn how to play and stuff, but at the same time, it worked. It's an amazing show. They're like really funny and it's very entertaining. They've got a really good pace and stuff. It does not overstay its welcome, which I also feel is the problem that other indie shows have. But honestly, like it had been steadily building momentum, at least in that aspect, with like podcasting and stuff. And then once, Critical Role hit, that was kind of like the most mainstream version of that. Because I think even before that, like, was it like the Adventure Zone and stuff? Like, I think they've already been going. But like when Critical Role hit, they were the most like kind of accessible and the one that was easy enough for mass consumption, and then that just kind of like that's just throwing a tank of gas on a bonfire.
I completely blame that on Geek. Like, I mean, I love the cast, don't get me wrong, but I completely blame that on Geek and Sundry and Felicia Day. She had some star power, Geek and Sundry had some clout, and then they're like, hey, here's these guys that nobody knows their faces. We're going to throw them in this show and see what you think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they had a pretty elevated platform when they got there, and then they used it well.
I mean, and like on a kind of personal note, I also feel that like there was that period. I mean, it feels like at least to a degree it's tapering off. But I mean, there was that period when like video games was just, riddled with like the live service bullshit and, everything was like, free to pay and loot boxes and all of that garbage and stuff. And they're like, we can't figure out why we're losing money, hand over fist and stuff. And it's like, yeah, because people don't want to pay for that stuff and everything. So it's like, okay, video games suck. But then, hey, there's this other thing that, there's this other option, and oh, holy shit, it's actually fun. And there's this big community I didn't know about that you kind of get to dive in. And so it's, there's like a migration almost. So I feel like that's definitely a big contributor to the rise in that.
I feel like talking about that too, I mean, like, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, the downfall of video games is kind of what I was talking about with the death of at-home multiplayer, you know what I mean? And it was all part of the death of video games, and definitely contributed to the rise of Dungeons and Dragons. And in Dungeons and Dragons, video games definitely failed because of the free-to-play model, right? The microtransaction model. And Dungeons and Dragons exceeded in the free-to-play model.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons, it was literally free-to-play. Like, you could get the basic rules for free, basic character creation for free, a basic adventure and how to run it for free. And then they had all this other stuff. And they're like, if you want it, here it is to buy. And it just the way you kind of put it just made me realize that. And it just kind of blows my mind a little bit that like what killed video games is.
And also, here's the stuff to buy. If you buy it, it's yours. It's not you have access to it until we close the server down. Or until like it gets too buggy and we've been ignoring it the whole time, and no one, none of the community wants to throw patches at it and stuff, and we're just going to crash it, and you've just sunk your money into it.
And with D&D, you got what you paid for.
Right.
There was no loot boxes. There was no random. You didn't go out and buy like a pack of D&D cards that like might have the class in it that you wanted. You got what you paid for.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing, but it worked, and it worked like gangbusters.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now they are. I mean, and you're right. No one has to buy any of the stuff. But now, if you look at it from like, let's just say you look at it from a downloadable content perspective.
Yeah.
You know, they've got all of these source books that, yes, you have to buy.
Mm-hmm.
You have Unearthed Arcana now, which, you know, is essentially Dragon Magazine for me. You know?
Yeah, it's what it is. It's 100% what it is.
And that's all a bunch of, again, downloadable content. And it's great stuff. And again, stuff that you don't need to use, but it's there if you want to. It's
yeah. Even the what are they called? The spell. I need new glasses. Like it's the spell book cards. I've got like 2 packs of those, and it's like, yeah, you've got other ways of like looking up, your spells and stuff if you're playing a magic user in the game. Or, hey, you got a little bit extra money to throw down. You can get these cards that are just like right in front of you, and it's there, and it's just this little thing that like you don't have to buy all of them. You don't have to buy half of them. You just get the pack for the ones that you're using, for the types of characters you want to play, and you're good to go.
God damn, did Wizards do shit you could buy for D&D right? Like, and it's all optional. And yet, I'll buy all of it because it's all fucking done so right.
Well, but the coolest thing about all of this is they're making new shit because people are buying the shit that they've put out.
Mm-hmm.
People are buying the shit that they put out because it's becoming more popular. And it's becoming more popular because of all the new shit they're putting out for it. It's just like a fucking wheel of just awesome. It's like the more popular it gets, the more cool stuff they're going to put out. The more cool stuff they put out, the more popular it's going to get. And it's like, oh my God, give me a real gelatinous cube now. I need this.
Well, that barrier of entry, like there isn't one. Like when they made it this quote unquote free to play model, like their number one selling product for a very long time, it might even still be their number one selling product, is the starter kit. And if you play the starter kit, if you buy the starter kit, man, it came with everything you needed. If you wanted to be a dungeon master, it came with everything you needed: basic rules, basic character sheets, a dungeon master screen, an adventure you could run, some dice. Came with everything. And I mentioned this in the last D&D podcast we played, that they came out with a new version of the starter kit, the Essentials kit.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I have purchased and begun to run the Essentials kit for a brand new group of players, people who've never played D&D before. And holy shit, the Essentials kit. I can't keep saying it over and over again, but god damn it, has it never been easier to start playing Dungeons & Dragons. The Essentials kit makes Dungeons & Dragons so easy to learn, play, and run.
Well, I mean, I'll go back to this, and it's funny that I say this, given what position I was in at the time. But Kimmy, how much did it cost you to play that first game of D&D?
Couldn't remember if I bought snacks or anything because it didn't cost me a damn thing.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that I gave you dice.
Yeah, you tossed me a set of dice while we got started, and you had my character sheet wrote up.
Yep.
And then we were low enough level to where the couple of spells that I had, you just had the description available in case I asked what it does or I needed to use them, and you needed to check up on the rules.
Right. So
yeah,
based off of
literally said single sheet of paper in front of me, a pencil, and then the dice. And
mm-hmm. So, I mean, depending on who you got running for you, it could literally cost you nothing, and that's the beauty of this. Because the game itself is essentially just knowledge. It's a set of rules. And that's the fun thing about knowledge is as long as, you don't need a book to pass along knowledge. And honestly, when you got to pay $60 nowadays for a game that isn't even complete to play on your console or computer, really novel to be able to sit down at a table, be handed everything you need to be able to play a game, and you're good to go.
And like everything else that we keep repeating, and not only that, but it's a social experience. It's a storytelling experience. It's become less and less gatekeepy. I mean, like, which I think is part to do with a lot of those live play podcasts that came out before Critical Role. When you were talking about a lot of them, they had that old D&D gatekeepy attitude, which I think is part of why Critical Role was so successful more than a lot of the ones that came before it. Was you didn't have one type of person on Critical Role. Like all the different players and the dungeon master, they were all different types of people. Like if you watch that show, it wasn't like this one type of person that was playing the game. You had all these different types of people, and they were all very inclusive, and they all had a very nice attitude about the whole thing, and like there was nothing gatekeepy about it. But I do want, Kimmy, since you've listened to it, and because I haven't, and I've got no experience with it, and because I watch a lot of TikTok. D&D TikTok is like 75% Adventure Zone.
Which I think is funny is I came into I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I came into this thinking we're talking about all the things that are contributing to the resurgence of D&D, and I was like, and TikTok is a huge fucking factor.
It is.
Huge fucking factor. And you say Adventure Zone is a lot of it. You are totally missing all of the fucking unique D&D content that's being shoved out there.
Oh, there is. But like if you look at a lot of D&D cosplayers, like the number one D&D cosplay is Taco.
Yeah. But I'm even Kimmy has some unique D&D content on her TikTok. I mean, you haven't done a lot, but I mean, it was good. And
it's good.
So yeah, TikTok.
So like
crazy.
Kimmy, why do you think Adventure Zone has been so successful? Because I haven't listened to a single episode. I've got nothing.
I actually haven't either, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I know of the show, but yeah, Adventure Zone wasn't. It's one that like I've kind of through the grapevine heard about because a few of the other podcast and content producers have talked about and stuff, and I've seen a couple of like animatics that people have made on YouTube, which that's another thing that actually I think is really cool is when you've got this audio only medium, and then people are basically they've got Critical Role, the Not Another D&D podcast, even Root Tales of Magic, all these different like really cool podcasts and stuff, and then you've got people basically making these like animated shorts of them, and some of them, I mean, honestly, it causes like just the thing, like if it's something you listen to, it's like it suddenly works on a whole new level. But yeah, actually, Adventure Zone is kind of like the big one that I haven't listened to. So
there's so much D&D content. Like I feel so bad for like I've watched a little bit of Critical Role, no Adventure Zone. I've listened to pretty much all of Acquisitions Incorporated, but that's because I started with Acquisitions Incorporated back when they were still playing 4th edition.
I don't feel Those episodes are long, man. What the fuck?
They're very long.
No, I don't feel bad at all. I've chosen. I have chosen.
That's the hill that you've staked your flag in. I mean, like, yeah, I started with Drunks and Dragons and stuff. So, I mean, like, going all the way through that and even
the 400 episodes. Congratulations on listening to that.
Actually, that's the thing. It got to the point where, like, I can't remember where I tapered off at. And was like, oh, my God, they're still going and stuff. But I don't remember where in the story I left off. So now... So it's like, but they have so many back episodes that it's like I could just jump in for like, some of their one shots or just like, I want to hear this specific episode. But I mean, yeah, you got stuff like listen to all of Not Another D&D podcast. The bunch of people that did was it Adam Ruins Everything and the College Humor shorts.
Dimension 20.
Yeah. That's another one. Actually, a bunch of people that do Dimension 20. This is their other D&D podcast that they do, and like that whole first campaign, honestly, the finale of that campaign, I actually ended up crying when it ended because it was so well done, and it was like, I mean, like it was perfect storytelling, and it was actually like, saying goodbye to like, characters that you had spent all this time with, like people, like, I mean, yeah, they're fake characters and stuff, but it was just, we were so invested in it, and it was so well done, actually getting like choked up when it was finally over. And they've, recently they've done like, I think 2 or 3 like mini campaigns and stuff, and then they just started like a new full one. So it's like they have so much content, and then I'm pretty much just completely swearing by Rude Tales of Magic, because that's the one that they focus more on the storytelling than the game aspect, which I kind of, it's kind of a cool, I think, it sets them apart from a lot of the other ones where you almost don't even realize they're, rolling dice and stuff. Like there's times where it seriously is edited to where it may as well just be like an audio drama. And all the people in it are like comedians and improvisers and stuff. So it's like, it's very well acted and performed. And they have like really, really good production, especially since, the whole plague hit, and they had to actually start doing their, I guess they used to do it in studio, and then they had to do everything over like a Zoom call. And once they started doing that, then like the production started kind of steadily ramping up as well with some of the stuff that they experimented with. So it's like, yeah, now it's a amazingly well done show.
I do want to take a minute to talk about, and like, while I do not want to give any positivity to the Crisis, I do want to take a minute to talk about what the Crisis has done for Dungeons and Dragons.
You have to acknowledge that. You have to.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people working from home. You have a lot of people not being able to go out and wanting to socialize, and now they have time to watch these. Maybe pick up one more podcast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To watch, listen, or even play the damn game. I mean, we had an entire campaign, last year? How many months did that thing go on? That was just supposed to be a little one-off that we were doing until the thing blew over, and then it kept going out longer and longer. So we just rolled with it, and we kept adding to it and just doing more sessions of, okay, well, we're just going to keep going with these characters.
And the only reason why we're not playing it right now is because people are getting called back to work.
Yeah.
So,
I can tell you.
Okay, and to be fair, you did have the ending already thought out, so it was kind of like, and to be honest, after we had that session of you telling us how you envisioned it wrapping up, it's kind of like, I'm kind of glad we ended it, because if we would have kept going, I don't know if we would have been able to get steered back to that, and it was a good ending. So it was a good ending for the story and the characters.
Yeah, and I will say that at least on my end, that would not have happened if not for the Crisis.
Yeah.
No, because I have my own home group. This group that I've been playing with since I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
18. Anyways, I'm 42. I have a group that I've been playing with since I was 18, and we would go over there and play. So yeah, I don't know how often I would have been able to play online with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already started a whole other game just before the shit went down, and we got what, 3 sessions?
That's right. We had our normal game, and then we start the sexy side piece.
Right, you're welcome.
So yeah,
I'm still proud of that name. But yeah, we did I think 3 sessions of our game with that group, and then it was like, okay, we gotta quarantine now. We're not going to be able to do this. Well, those of us that were already doing it in person, that's not a good idea anymore. We're just going to start doing it all online, and then, we'll just get a side game going, and then that ended up turning into our main campaign.
And it's funny too, because this is completely off subject, but we do this. And I felt so bad. And the whole reason why I even wanted to end that campaign anyways is because the whole thing started out, I didn't put any planning into that game whatsoever. I didn't plan it. I went into it and completely improvised the entire fucking thing because I didn't think it was going to last that long. I thought people would wear their fucking masks and stay inside. And this thing would be over in a couple months.
Yeah.
But it didn't. And this drug on longer and longer, and people started getting attached to their characters and the storyline and NPCs and what actually was going on. And I had to start keeping track of stuff. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I fucked up somewhere. I made this a real game. I didn't mean to do this.
Right. I mean, well, that and like I was even telling somebody the other night, we were talking about D&D stuff, and I was telling her that like it was crazy because like the first few sessions in that game, we were in this kind of magic, like diesel punk kind of city, and then we had to steal this like prototype robot thing and stuff, and then like 3 sessions later, no, actually we're this Scooby-Doo fucking rock band just on the road playing shows and everything. Brad makes me take a level in bars so I don't ruin the shows. And now I'm part of the band, and somebody else is like our manager, and we've got like the dwarf is our bouncer and roadie and stuff. And we're just fucking like, okay, we're having to come up like. I think I still have my notes of like the bullshit song names we were coming up with and having to make rolls on. For like how well did we play? What were we playing? We're playing a bunch of dwarfs. Okay, we got to come up with some dwarf sounded songs, and we got to roll.
I'm imagining whoever you're talking to is just sitting there as blood is just coming out of their ears.
Look, and let me tell you, had that game been planned, there's no way it would have turned out that way.
Oh, absolutely.
No fucking way. Like, if I had thought I was going to play more than like 3 sessions of this game.
It was a heist game. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had thought I was playing more 3 sessions of this hit, no goddamn way I would have played a fucking Tanuki monk. No fucking way. Like, no. And then, like, as it got crazier and crazier, I was just like, all right, fucking roll with it. Because, like, let me tell you, I don't play characters like that. I don't play games like that. Because, like, I take my characters and, like, who they are and what they can do way more seriously. But once the fun and the goofiness started rolling, I was just like, fuck it. Let's, to the moon. To the moon with it.
I'll just take like at least a little bit of responsibility for that because mine started off with, okay, I want to play like a full-on magic user, so I'm gonna do a sorcerer, and I'm like, all right, I had this kind of character concept, looking through stuff in the book, and then just stumbled across like looking through Unearthed Arcana at work, and then seeing the Clockwork Soul sorcerer that they had in there, and like as soon as I saw that, and I'm just like, oh, I can play Data from Star Trek. This is my character now. He's fucking Bishop from Aliens. Sign me the fuck up. I'm gonna make him a little hobbit, and he's gonna be fucking weird as hell, and I'm gonna magic the shit out of everything.
Yeah, and literally all that was supposed to be, that whole game was just to get a reaction out of my daughter. If anybody's listening, my daughter was playing this game. And in one of the other games we played, one of her favorite NPCs, or it was her character. Yeah. It was her character, but it was an NPC in this, was Randy, who is a Warforged cleric?
Yeah.
A Warforged cleric, and she fucking loved that guy. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give her the treat that every D&D player deserves. Their character's going to pop up as an NPC in another game. So yeah, and that's all it was supposed to be.
And that was like after we found Randy and then like got him out, like that was going to be the end. Like that was it.
Yep. So then I had to put a magical mushroom kingdom underneath the city.
Yeah. Well, we had that awesome fight at the tavern, which you said you designed. We were supposed to run away from, but we ended up just being too stubborn to give up and just fighting all of those clockwork soldier guys or whatever.
It is also my fault, which seems to be a running occurrence for me, underestimating the monk.
Yeah, you were a freight train of nuts, so
Yeah.
And hey, I have to thank you because I got that wonderful magic user moment of we sat down and we had that really elaborate plan for sneaking out, and then the second that Ray's bard fucked up his sleep spell and it didn't work, and I just said, well, that didn't work. I'm gonna throw a fireball right at the front of the bar, set the front of the bar on fire, and blew the goddamn doors and everything off. But it hit the bad guys, so it still counts.
And I'm sure, Baron, if you didn't expect it to be just a little, practically one shot, like a few, like it was supposed to be a few sessions, but like there's a lot of shit that like when I came to you and I was like, I want to be a Tanuki, like there's no official, but like you probably wouldn't have said yes to that if we were doing like a serious campaign, but you're like, yeah, fuck it. I mean, like, why not? You're only going to be playing like 3 sessions. Why not? Like, yes, whatever you want to do with your character. Like, fuck it.
Pretty much my fuck it. Yeah, just do it. The only thing I didn't allow was guns. That's the only thing I didn't allow.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there was a set rule for that yet.
I don't think so either.
And let's face it, he openly said that shit wasn't balanced. So
yeah, I think Eberron and Tasha's is what finally brought those into like official. But regardless, this just goes to show you, like we just went off. I don't know. I wasn't looking at the time about this wonderful time we had telling a story together that we had zero plans of telling, and this is what Dungeons and Dragons has always been, and what we as human beings need. Like you might get it somewhere other than Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe you're like really into HBO's original series, or like you've got like ghost adventure shows that you like to watch or whatever. But like, fact of the matter is, we need social interaction and we need stories to tell them, to listen to them, and like when you can be a part of them, it's even better. And that's what Dungeons and Dragons has always been. And like being able to show people that this is what Dungeons and Dragons is, with a many-pronged attack of the live play podcast, making it zero barrier to entry so anybody can try it, putting it out in media, putting it out, like you said, the marketing for 5th edition and D&D Next was amazing. And then the death of video games, like they're not dead, but like, the decline of video games, I should say. I mean, like all of this kind of showed people what Dungeons and Dragons is and what it always has been and what it can be. And that's it. There it is. There's the revival.
And I will say too, if this tells you anything regarding how D&D happens to be doing, there was a thing that I backed on Kickstarter, which Kickstarter I think is also another huge contribution to what is happening with D&D and role-playing games in general.
Goddamn right.
There was a supplement that got put out. It was the Twisted Guide to Taverns or something along those lines. Yeah, Twisted Tavern Guide. But anyways,
is that the XP to level 3 guys?
That's the Eldermancy.
Okay.
Eldermancy. But they work together a lot.
Gotcha.
It raised over $1 million.
God damn.
Raised over $1 million, and it's just a supplement. It's just a supplement book that just tells you about how to make good taverns in your game, and it has. And I mean, don't get me wrong. This guy also did the Stibble's Guide to Companions and stuff, and it did really well. We're pumping money into this hobby. We're pumping money into this hobby. So I mean, I would almost even say that another big contributor to the resurgence of D&D is us.
You could definitely say that.
The Dungeon Masters, we who are accepting new players into our games and showing them, hey, this is fun. Why don't you play? for a little while, learn the game, run for a little bit, and just get it going, you know?
Yeah, fuck the gatekeeping. We have destroyed the gate.
Oh yeah, there should be no gate. You guys run your little feet all over the fucking yard. Convince these corporate guys that there are millions of us that want cool shit, and let them put that cool shit out on the market so that we can get this cool shit. I want more t-shirts. I want more miniatures. I want more fucking cool ass dice, because the more you guys, the more they make, the cheaper it's going to get, and us poor people can afford it.
That's that supply and demand. Like if demand keeps going up, if they see, look, they've always saw that they could sell 100 of them at $60 a piece.
Yeah.
If they see they can sell 1 million of them at $5 a piece, that's what they're gonna fucking do.
If they can make more money by selling it cheaper to more people, then they're going to do that. Yes.
That's where let's bring it back to something we haven't talked about yet. That's where TikTok, YouTube, D&D, social media comes in, because we're all finding each other and putting out more stuff. And the more we find each other and the more stuff we put out, the more people come out of the woodwork. And I can't tell you, like, scrolling through D&D TikTok, how many times I've come across a TikTok creator who goes, all right, that's it. I'm tired of fucking hearing about it. Like, I'm tired of hearing about fucking cool it is. Somebody show me how to play D&D.
I put one thing out. I put one thing out D&D related, and I've had so many people like asking me, "How do I play? Can I play in a game?" And I'm like, "Well, there's 80 of you asking me if you can play in my next game, so that's going to be a no." But again, tell them there's plenty of people out there looking for players. Plenty of people.
Mm-hmm.
If I could, there are so many people on my Facebook that have shared like Quincy's Tavern TikToks on their wall, and they've never played a day of D&D.
Mm.
And Quincy isn't expressly D&D, but
he's D&D.
He's D&D. So, yeah. And it's great.
He's literally released supplements of like, here's how to put D&D, here's how to put Quincy in your D&D campaign.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but Momo O'Brien did like a whole game.
Mm-hmm.
Like she set up interactions with her character.
And you could duet it. I did it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was amazing. Kimmy, if you haven't checked out Momo O'Brien, great personality. She's on YouTube as well.
Okay, good. I was about to say, please don't make me download TikTok again.
No. But she doesn't do that stuff on YouTube, but she has great material on her YouTube. That's actually, I've been following Momo O'Brien on YouTube for a couple years now.
Okay.
Personalities on YouTube too.
Do what?
So many good personalities and content on YouTube too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and if a good example of the zero barrier to entry on YouTube is Matthew Colville. There's an entire playlist on his YouTube called, Running the Game. And like there's plenty of evidence of zero barrier entry to play the game, right? Like you can it's obvious if you want to play the game, it's easy to get into. Matthew Colville turned that around and was like, hey, if you want to run the game, there's zero barrier. Anybody can run, and here's how. And he did a really cool, and like dude works in video games and stuff like that, and he's kind of famous at this point. And it's an excellent series, and it's just, like I said, it just goes to show more of the zero barrier to entry, regardless of what part of the game it is that you're wanting to get on.
This is an overwhelming subject. Because it's like there's so many things, and each of these things have so many different factors. I mean, even some of the factors that are contributing to the resurgence of D&D are also contributing to the toxicity in the community. For instance, and I say this, hating that it's called this, because he is outspoken against it, the Mercer effect.
Yeah, but even he himself has said that like it's bad for D&D.
No. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's outspoken against that happening. And I feel bad that it's called that, but is
there really a better name for it though? I mean,
no, but Matthew Mercer is such an amazing storyteller. but you have all these new people coming into D&D because of Critical Role, and then they go and play a game, and they're like, why don't you do this like Matthew Mercer? And it's like, because I'm not Matthew Mercer.
Because you're not Marisha Ray. I'm sorry. That's been my answer to the Matt Mercer effect as of recent. Like, it's been like, why don't you DM like Matt Mercer DMs? It's because like you don't play like his players play.
Yeah, that's true. My response was going to be, well, why don't you get in on his game then?
It's a good one too. That's a good one.
But yeah, I mean, I love their shit, but you know, that is like the opposite end of gatekeeping, because you have gatekeepers, but then you have these new people coming into play, and they're like, well, why aren't you doing it exactly like this? And then you get the asshole gatekeepers like, well, that's why I'm doing this. It's like, okay,
yeah,
shut the fuck up, all of you, please.
I mean, the community's never going to be perfect, right? You're always going to have.
Community is never perfect. In any community, you are going to have toxic people.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
You always have assholes.
Yeah.
I mean, but like, you know, that being said, the Matt Mercer effect, quote unquote, has had good parts too. I mean, my DMing style has definitely changed. Look, I've watched Matt Mercer, like, I don't know, like I've watched maybe 10 episodes.
And like smile at the camera and stuff. Are we talking about separate things now?
Yeah. I've watched maybe 10 episodes of Critical Role, and even before I started watching Critical Role, like it has so permeated the hobby that it has changed my method of DMing a bit. You know what I mean? Like, and there's nothing wrong with looking at a DM and going, I like the way you do that, and taking it and making it part of your own style.
No, you should. You should.
Yeah.
In fact, if someone's like, wow, you kind of game like this person, take that shit as a compliment. I mean, unless it's like, hey, you kind of run this game like you know, a wrecked freight train. You maybe don't take that as a compliment.
Unless they're talking about the guild train, in which case that's high praise. I mean,
not a wrecked guild train though.
My guild master mug says you can certainly try in bold letters right across it. And like, I was saying that shit before I ever saw an episode of Critical Role.
I'm going to be honest. I think you can certainly try is way better than how do you want to do this? I think
I'll be honest with you. I adopted how do you want to do this for a little while because I was running for a group of people who started playing D&D because they were watching Critical Role. And like, they wanted that moment. So like, I adopted how you want to do this for a little while, but I have completely gotten rid of it. Like, I don't use it anymore. My new phrase for you killed it is that's enough. Like, they say how much damage you do it, and I say that's enough. And like, if they want to describe how they killed them, they'll do it right then and there. They know what I've said. You know what I mean? That's my new catchphrase for you've killed it. Is that's enough. Yeah,
I think my home game, we never had to have a prompt of, you know, how do you want to kill this monster? It was always, you know, we say exactly what we're doing every time.
Clap them cheeks.
Oh yeah. I love that. I mean, even if it wasn't the killing blow, I would love to hear, you know, hey, I'm going after this thing and I'm clapping cheeks on these things. Because you know what? Like, you guys haven't been told this before, but if you're descriptive on your attacks and shit, you get bonuses. I give you guys bonuses.
So you're saying that I need to keep that shit going? Okay.
No. Yes, I give secret bonuses for all kinds of stuff. All kinds.
I took something from Baron's DM toolbox from that first game of 4th edition that he ran with me. And D&D 4th edition, I don't know if it was in D&D before 4th edition, but I know 4th edition had something called Inspiration. And 5th edition has it as well. And Baron was like, fuck giving you an inspiration point, you just have it. He took these little marbles, and like, if you did something he thought was cool, or like we're super descriptive, or like we're out of the box, he'd hand you a marble. And then later on, you could hand in that marble and not only get advantage on whatever it was that you were trying to do, but like you could do some cool shit that was just like well outside of your character's ability.
Essentially, eventually you would get like a critical hit or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not just you do double damage, you do something awesome with it.
Yeah.
And I treated them like luck points is what I did.
Yeah. And I've got myself a little wooden bowl of I guess they're like fish tank decorations or like vase filler or something like that, but they're the little flat blue glass marble-esque things, and I hand them fuckers out.
Magic counters.
Yes. Except bigger. They're like the size of a 50-cent piece. So like it probably wouldn't be used for magic, but like they're about the size of maybe between a quarter and a 50-cent piece. But yeah, I do that because I want to reward my players for doing cool shit.
Yep. Exactly.
And it's tangible. You hand that to them and they're like, "Oh, that's cool." Like it's tangible.
Mhm. Yep. It's good stuff. You pick up little shit like that. And honestly, and I know you said that, you're not going to feel like you're going to feel like you're new until you DM your first game. You're never going to be ready to DM your first game.
Ever.
So whenever you feel like jumping into it, you just let me know. I'll be in your group.
Okay.
I DM a game every Sunday. I am still not ready when they come through the door on Sunday. Like to this day, I am still unprepared. I am flying by the seat of my pants, and like I'm making it work.
I mean, that was literally a year of me.
Yeah,
that was my game. That was my running.
Mm-hmm. Even when I prepare, I'm not prepared. Is my point. Like even if I have like a story that I'm trying to run, like I'm running out of a book right now, I'm still not prepared.
Nice.
Because you never know what they're going to do. You can never prepare for everything that your players are going to do ever.
Yeah, maximum preparation, total flexibility.
Yeah.
As the world's greatest DM once said, "We'll throw caution to the wind, and if we die, I'll greet the devil in hell as an equal."
Nice. Yeah, I gotta fight getting more into this because I think we covered a lot of it in our other ones, but yeah. There's so much.
But yeah, I think basically.
Why don't we do a D&D podcast for fuck's sake? We could just talk about this every fucking week.
Because anyway. I feel like we would just repeat a lot of the same shit every episode.
Of course we would.
And we'd never go anywhere else. That's the biggest reason. Like so we'd have like 5 episodes, and by the time you've listened to all 5 episodes, you've heard everything that we have to say. We'd still do it for 200 episodes, but you'd never hear anything that wasn't outside of those first 5 episodes.
More than likely.
But yeah, I mean, so basically, I'm not trying to steal your wrap up here, Baron, but
yeah, it is getting about that time, so we're gonna.
Oh yeah.
Look at that! Look at that face.
I'm never ready for these wrap ups.
But essentially, I mean, like the resurgence of D&D came about because you had an edition of D&D that was the easiest edition to learn so far. They removed any barrier of entry, like by making it free. They marketed the shit out of it. They paid professional cosplayers to show up at conventions. They sponsored people. They marketed the shit out of it. Then, with live play podcasts, removed the stigma because you can't say, "Oh, this is what D&D is, and this is who plays it," and you can't sit there and hold that stigma when you can literally watch people not do that thing. Like you can go, they're like, "Oh, D&D is just this." Really? Look at this. It's not that. It's not the thing. Where's your argument? Then you had people were looking for a new game to play with the downfall of video games and like the way that was trending. And then you have the crisis on top of that. And people were looking for any kind of social interaction. People were starving for social interaction. And
distraction. Yeah.
And Dungeons and Dragons is like one of the most social things you can do.
Yep.
And now we have those of us who've been playing it the whole time, whether you're new, whether you're old, whether you started somewhere in the middle, like now we all have this awesome hobby and more people to play it with, meaning that we don't have to put up with a lot of things that we had to put up with when it was not prevalent. And we can there's nothing nerdier or geekier than spending adult money on frivolous shit. And there's more frivolous shit than ever that's available, and I'm buying it all.
Yeah.
And it's all because of how many people are playing now. And it's not showing any signs of stopping.
So all you new people that may be listening to this right now that maybe haven't started, keep in mind, Guildmaster Rick and I have our foot in the door. We're keeping that gate open, so flood the fucking gates.
Mm-hmm. We will do everything we can to make sure the gate stays open, or that we tear it down and it never gets rebuilt.
Yeah, bring it all on.
And the gatekeepers and the gatekeeping. I mean, like there is nothing good that can come from people keeping people out of the hobby.
I think that's a hell of a wrap up.
Yeah. All right, Kimmy, if people like what you had to say, can they find you anywhere else on the internet?
Absolutely not. As a true Fae, I can only be found when I choose to be, and I appear when needed most.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. castersguild@gmail.com. If you're trying to get into the hobby and you're looking for tips, send me an email. I'll point you in all the right directions. And if you have any other questions or ideas for the podcast, please let us know. Check us out on all the socials. We're on YouTube and Twitch and stuff now. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye. Go roll some dice somewhere. I mean it.
Mean it.